here. That's right. I was the FBI all along. Ha! Got you. Well, Kash Patel is now the presumptive head of the FBI, and he's planning on some big changes. Here are 10 drastic changes coming to the Bureau. Number 1, all FBI agents must go back to wearing trench coats, carrying snub-nosed revolvers, and saying, "See?" after every statement. It's time to return to the glory days, see? Number 2, let's cancel all current plans to assassinate Donald Trump. It's only fair. He did win. We let him. Number 3, all of Melania's sundresses recovered during the Mar-a-Lago raid must be returned. We've had them long enough. That means you, Steve. Number 4, from now on, all agents must submit a written request before grooming a domestic terrorist. A return to common sense MK Ultra policies. Number 5, the X-Files are to be reopened. That's right, I'm doing it. The truth is, after all, out there. Number 6, new applicants must weigh under 400 pounds. This is a step in the right direction for fitness requirements. I don't want to hear any complaints, Steve. I don't even know how you fit in that sundress. Number 7, the services of the Chief Officer of Quadriplegic Black Lesbian Representation will no longer be required. Steve, you're fired. No severance package. Number 8, remove all 850 wiretaps at Mar-a-Lago. It's pretty boring listening anyway. Trump just keeps, bragging about how great he is. We get it. He's Trump. Number 9, agents will now be required to arrest criminals. This is a new cutting-edge idea in criminal justice. I don't want to hear any complaints. Get out there and do your jobs. And finally, number 10, all work retreats to Epstein Island are canceled. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. Kash Patel is a bit of a party pooper. It's a shame, too. I had gotten all the 3 keys to open up the temple. I was gonna find out the secrets there. Well, it really looks like Kash Patel is gonna get the FBI back in shape, see? I need to get my new trench coat, see?
10, 3, 8. Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Vostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Breaking down national security with former Secretary Robert Wilkie. The death of DEI and one of America's most notorious killers, Patrice Onwuka and Abby Johnson. Plus, lots of sketch comedy from the Babylon Bee and the Glorious American. And making her debut, Jamie McDonald in the spotlight. And now, from Times Square, the only man in attendance at last week's inaugural who wasn't caught eye-groping the future Mrs. Bezos. Here.
Is that what we're calling it now? You said that I was the only guy there, which I wasn't there, caught not eye-groping Mrs. Bezos. Is that what?
Yeah. Should we not?
No, it's true. No, it's a good term. It's a very good term because Mr. Zuckerberg was.
Yes.
And there were a few others.
Uh-huh.
And it made for interesting commentary following the inauguration because you think the nation's been an absolute disaster and a wreck. And it should be the focus that we're going to go in a different direction. And the president gave a fine speech and all the things that he wanted to focus on and have us come away with, and really great changes. And then the future Mrs. Bezos shows up almost dressed. And when she sits down, it's like all of the and did you notice it was all the web guys?
I did.
It was all the internet guys that were like. And it's like, dudes, maybe you've been in the basement too long. I don't know. Maybe you made your mansions into basements when you made your millions. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying, when you're out in public, I don't care how beautiful the lady is. If you're going to go, people are going to notice, and then you're probably not going to be invited back to like the next inauguration.
Probably not.
Which absolutely just blew the minds of Rachel Maddow and a lot of these people anyway. So, it wasn't a bad day, but yes, I was not among those who were eye groping the future. That's a good term, Dave.
Thank you.
Got to use that more.
Please.
Well, they've used other things. Mouth gapers,
Slobbering
when they walk by, that kind of thing. But I like the eye groping. It's very spot on in terms of what it's talking about. Anyway, welcome to the weekend, friend. Let's have some fun. And it's gonna be fun. I don't care who you are. I don't care your political leanings. I just love that you're here and that we have a good time. But if you don't think the next 4 years are going to be an absolute acid trip for the mind, you're just not on the same page as everybody else. And I've never done acid, so I don't really know what that means. But it's the closest I can come to imagining what it might have been like back in the 60s or 70s. But from the minute that his hand came off, or sort of came off the Bible, Donald Trump went to work. And on day one, 200 executive orders, 416 within 48 hours, criminal migrants already rounded up and headed back. You got 1,500 new troops at the border. You've got the president went to Davos and back this week, yelled at the bankers and said, stop prejudicing your loan policies against conservative companies. I mean, said it to their face. Like he did in the inauguration. He said it to Biden and Kamala's face, and they had to sit there and take it. They got away with bloody murder for 4 years, and in some cases actual murder. And he put them on trial and he convicted them, and yet they still shook his hand when it was all done. This is a very different Donald Trump that we've met, and it's a very different Donald Trump era. And here's what I really love about what he's doing, and this is my main thought for the monologue this weekend. Trump has a new policy standard, and I've never seen anybody do it before. But I'm calling it the buckshot presidential policy. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever gone hunting, and I know that for most of you progressives, you never have, but if you go with maybe your uncle or grandfather or somebody, if they've got a shotgun and they take you out hunting, you'll learn all about this. But buckshot isn't just one big slug. You can shoot those things and they'll put a hole in, half of a car if you shoot a slug out of a shotgun. But if you shoot the buckshot, the beautiful thing about it is it spreads evenly and does just as much damage to everything that it hits. And so when you're taking down a really big animal, it's handier to use the buckshot than the slugs. And here's the thing. Every one of those little BBs in the buckshot, that's a different policy area that Trump is playing offense on. He's got State Department, national security, economy, southern border, gender fight in the schools. He's focused on every relief for North Carolina and California, not playing favorites when it comes to who gets the federal help, et cetera, et cetera. Appointments, telling the American people that better days are coming. 200 executive orders before the end of the first day. I kid you not, friends. He's on offense on every front of the battle right now. And this is the kind of manic work that he's going to do for us for the next 2 years at least, because that's how long he's got a House and a Senate guaranteed. If he does a good job, by the way, I think that he'll get the Senate and the House for the next 2 years after that. But he's not wasting any time. He understands that things can change quickly. So so by firing the buckshot and all of the pebbles going in their very different directions, but all of them with the equal intensity and fervor. Pam Bondi at Department of Justice, Kash Patel at FBI, Lee Zeldin at the EPA, Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. There's not a single part of America that's going to be left the same when he's done this time. And all of it for the better. All of it for the better. He's even talking about repainting Air Force One and getting rid of the pansy powder blue, baby blue stuff, and actually going with like more manly colors. And I don't have a problem with that. I think it would be cool if we had like a darker navy with like a more maroon or burgundy style red and make America look rich even on our airplane. Think about Panama, Greenland, Canada, the alliances we're building, the way we're going to control the travel from one side of the globe to the other as the Arctic ice caps melt. And if we align ourselves with Greenland, even if we don't take them over, even if there's just a stronger alliance, we're going to build America's footprint. And you know what he's doing all of that for? It's not even for you and me. It's not even for the average voters, because we're not terribly impacted by that one way or the other on a day-to-day basis. But for our national security for the next 30 to 50 years, that stuff is important. And he's out there playing 4D chess. He's 16 moves ahead of everybody on the map, including Putin, China, Iran, North Korea. He's ahead of everybody. And it's the way it's going to be for the future. Friends, buckle up. It's going to be awesome. Coming back with former Secretary Robert Wilkie to talk national security on That Kevin Show. Keep it right there.
Here he is from New York. That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to That Kevin Show. Kevin McCullough, very glad to have you with us as we are in the throes of a new administration. And from the very get-go, from the moment that his hand came off the Bible, and I told you guys this for the last several months, there was going to be no grass growing under this administration's feet. They were going to make changes immediately. My good friend Brooks Singman broke on inauguration morning a big headline that said 200 executive orders. I was getting sourcing that was telling me that 2 weeks out from the administration, but it's been a rapid pace of signing things and getting things done. And here to break down some of what that looks like from a national defense perspective is the recently appointed chair of the National Security Center for the America First Policy Institute. We love AFPI, one of my favorite groups, and he is the former Undersecretary of Defense for the Trump administration in term one, and then he was part of the cabinet as Secretary of Veterans Affairs for the president in the first go-around. Robert Wilkie, welcome back. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
You got
Exciting
it.
times.
You've got big shoes to fill at AFPI because General Kellogg is moving on to other things. And it is a time of transition, not just for the administration, but for everybody else. But I think the president kind of blew people away in his inauguration speech because it was a list of things that he had campaigned, some of them more tacitly, some of them more overtly. But these are all things that the American people wanted. And you happen to be, along with Secretary McMahon, you guys happen to be the ones writing up a lot of this policy. So what should the nation expect coming out of these executive orders? How is it going to change what the country looks like right here, from the get-go?
Well, let's go back to the beginning, Kevin. This campaign by the president has been what Ronald Reagan called a call to arms, to fundamentally transform the trajectory of our country, not just in terms of the federal government and its relationship to the states, but also in terms of the cultural assault that has been taking place now for decades. That in the past, and you've railed against this, Republicans have only paid lip service to in order to get through the coming election.
Right.
And what we will have in the immediate aftermath of the inauguration is a tidal wave of executive orders that have been worked on for the last 2 years. You mentioned my dear friend Linda McMahon. Through the America First Policy Institute, we have been working around the clock on transition plans for each of the federal departments and agencies. And that also entailed writing executive orders. I'll give you an example of the contrast. When President Trump came in the first time, we had less than 3, I think maybe 2 executive orders that he signed. He will sign upwards of 200 on Inauguration Day. And those will range from closing our borders to enhancing our national defense, to unleashing on the world American energy power that will tilt the balance, not just in Europe, but in the Middle East, because in my view, and having worked on it, the plan is not only to give the Europeans a lifeline and drive down prices across the board here in the United States, but also to bankrupt the gangster regime in Moscow and the theocratic fanatics in Tehran.
Right.
Quick example. When President Trump left the first time, the Iranians had $5 billion left. That was it. Joe Biden started transferring tens of billions of dollars to them to buy them off, and they were shipping out more oil under Joe Biden than they did when the Shah was alive in his last 5 years in power. That's
crazy.
The kind of faculty lounge lunacy that stops on January 20th.
And it's got to be an immediate pinch that they feel, because if you're getting money, pallets of cash, for lack of a better term, from the administration, and you're moving that much oil, you are raking it in. But the minute that our energy hits the market and the cash flow stops, what does happen there, Robert? I mean, you've been the Undersecretary of Defense. Iran is the major power broker of all the bad stuff that goes on in the Middle East at present. And it's very much in our personal self-interest, but also in the interest of our allies to make sure that they can't do that anymore.
And it sends a message to China. Look, Moscow and Tehran are the junior partners of this axis that has built up around the regime of Xi Jinping.
Right.
I mean, he considers himself the new Chairman Mao, but Chairman Mao with a world vision that Mao was not capable of carrying off. And you weaken Iran, you weaken Russia, and you weaken China. That you're absolutely right. And give you an example. Putin pegged his war economy to the Biden $100 a barrel of oil. When Trump left, oil was under $40 a barrel. So Putin has had a windfall. Oil's going to go back below $40, and he's not going to be able to sustain his military buildup. The same applies with the Iranians, and they won't be able to fund what's left of Hezbollah and Hamas. They also won't be able to fund the Houthis. And on that note, and I've been railing against this for years, I don't think you're going to see a Houthi attack on the ships of the United States Navy without a concerted response that wrecks the infrastructure that they have. Remember, Joe Biden was responding in pinprick fashion, hitting them early in the morning after telling them to move their people out so no one would get hurt. And he blew up a couple of empty warehouses. That's the kind of nonsense that we've had to suffer through in the last 4 years.
No, what we need more of is what Trump did with Syria after the missile attacks against their own people. And that is, we just send some drones and some missiles in there and take care of business and make sure that they can't continue to operate like that. But we don't need boots on the ground, and we don't need there's a lot of kind of traditional old school thinking about military strength that we don't even really fight that way if we were under attack now. So why are we using that for deterrence? Let's use what actually works for the deterrence and go from there.
Right. The other side of that, and I think it's probably the most underreported national security story of the last 8 years, was that, as you mentioned, when Syria got out of control and Putin was stretching his tentacles into that country and he got too close to American troops, he was told by President Trump, back off. He didn't. And 300 of his little green men disappeared in a red mist. And he was in his box for the rest of the Trump administration. Yep. The same thing happened with the Iranians. They were sponsoring attacks on American forces in the desert. Trump told them to stop. They didn't. Then Soleimani disappeared on a Baghdad runway. And the Israelis had everything they needed to defend themselves, not the stop and start, drip, 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 restrictions on every item that we gave to them that you saw from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
No, I think that telling them that Gaza gets carpet bombed with Trump's permission, if they don't return the hostages, was the only way to get the hostages back.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
And we're back from Times Square. It's Kevin McCullough, and we're talking national defense, national security with the new administration. A whole different approach to just about everything that you can imagine is taking place. And Robert Wilkie, who served in the first Trump administration and is now the chair of the National Security Center for the America First Policy Institute, a very influential think tank when it comes to the America First agenda, is joining us. He is replacing General Keith Kellogg, who not only served in Trump 1 very admirably, and I might have to add, he did so for President or for Vice President Pence, which was probably not the best straw to draw if you were in Trump 1, but he did it, and then he still advised President Trump on many sensitive things, and it's great to see that he's going to be serving this administration in an advisor capacity as well. Very happy about that. But Robert Wilkie, you know this stuff as well as he did. What else besides what we covered in the last segment are you thinking we will see the biggest impact of? Putting troops on our southern border via executive action is something that has been kicked around for a long time. This president's doing it. Why does it matter?
Well, we have been the victim of an invasion the likes of which we can't catalog, we can't itemize. And
this stands up judicially if like some weirdo like AOC takes it to the court and says, hey, he doesn't have the power to, he's declaring an emergency on the southern border, hence the call to action for the troops that he's sending there.
It's fascinating. The guy who was once the darling of the progressive left, Woodrow Wilson, confronted the same thing on a smaller scale back in 1915 and 1916 when their version of the Mexican cartels at the beginning of the 20th century were raiding across the border, killing Americans, killing American soldiers. And the next thing the government of Mexico knew, John Pershing and 2 divisions of American troops and the new American Air Corps was flying above Mexico, in Mexico, to push them back. So it is something that's been done before on that border 100 years ago, 110 years ago. And President Trump was invoking the same powers that the Constitution...
And designating the cartels terrorist threats.
Yes.
Brilliant move. Why did he have to be the first one to come up with it?
It is shocking to me, and it's right out of a Tom Clancy novel where they're debating I think it was Clear and Present Danger, where the president is debating whether to declare these forces a clear and present danger to the safety of the United States. Donald Trump not only will do that today or whenever that executive order is signed, but that will employ the full force of the United States, economic, military. It will force the hand of the new government in Mexico City. What a lot of people in the press and the left don't understand is that Trump is, for want of a better term, a great poker player. Instead of cards, he will throw out an idea that staggers the listener. For instance, Greenland. That is the kind of thing that destabilizes the bad guys. And I would say that about the government of Mexico. They have gone along with this. They've allowed the 1/3 of their country to be taken over by these militarized drug gangs that are controlling entire swaths of Mexico.
Right.
And they pose a danger to the United States. Let me put that in perspective. Every year, the fentanyl that comes across that border unchecked kills twice as many people as died in 10 years of combat in Vietnam.
Wow.
It is the greatest loss of life that we have experienced since the Second World War. But it's happening on a yearly basis, over 110,000 Americans each year die from Mexican transshipped fentanyl. And the president is going to do everything he can to stop that. And he is sending a clear message to the Mexicans, even when he says he's going to rename on our maps the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
That is to send a signal to Mexico City that it's no longer business as usual.
Well, and he's also going to unleash local law enforcement to take care of businesses they need to in the urban inner cities of our country, which is the kind of the other half of the equation. Getting it across the border is one thing. Getting it into the hands of the gangs in the neighborhoods in the inner cities is another. And I really hesitate that these governors who have claimed, oh, we're not going to work with him at all. Look at how many Democrats were sitting on his team behind him at that ceremony. I think there's going to be, at least initially, more cooperation than what we've been signified. Robert Wilkie, we appreciate your insight and your kind of observations of what's going on. We'll be checking in with you in the days to come from the National Center for Security at AFPI.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. Here he is from New York. That Kevin McCullough.
So glad to have you with us back in Times Square. Kevin McCullough, That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com, That Kevin Show on all social media. One of the areas we've been talking a lot in the last few days about all of the changes that are coming at seemingly lightning speed with the new administration, some of which is going to impact the entire issue of life and what life means in the country. Again, we have a pro-life president and a pro-life administration that I think is going to be more aggressively pro-life than anything we've seen prior to this, at least in the modern era. And rejoining me to discuss is best-selling author and pro-life leader, Abby Johnson, who is probably most well known for the fact that she was an operator of a Planned Parenthood clinic, and after many years came to the decision that that wasn't the thing for her anymore and decided to speak out. And she has been rescuing not only babies since, but also helping women leave that industry and find really new peace and new hope. Abby, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kevin. Always good to be with you.
It's a new year, and I couldn't help but notice on the same week that Donald Trump gets sworn in that Cecile Richards dies. Mm-hmm. And I thought of you immediately when I heard the headline, because if you followed the headlines across the mainstream press, Cecile Richards, pioneering feminist, leader of women's rights, on and on the accolades went. And in my mind, I couldn't help but think about the 4 or 5 million baby girls that she had helped usher into the other side of death through her work at Planned Parenthood. And I was curious. I wanted to ask you at that moment, what was going through your head, Abby Johnson?
Yeah. Cecile was a friend when I worked at Planned Parenthood. And when I found out that she had this aggressive type of brain cancer, I reached out. Of course, though, when you leave Planned Parenthood, when you become a defector, as it will, you become invisible to them. And so any friendships that you had are immediately broken. They see you as a traitor. And so the attempts that I made went unanswered. And so then, all you can do is really pray and be hopeful. But I was sad. I was sad to see that she died with, what seemed to be no repentance, no sorrow for what she had done. Because you're right. I mean, millions of children died under her watch. And for many in the secular media, they would say, they did say she was a hero and a champion. And that was what I once believed. But those of us who know the destruction of Planned Parenthood know the truth. And
so let me ask you this.
It's a sad reality.
And I want to be very raw, or at least as willing as you are in this conversation. Is it your opinion, having been on both sides of the Planned Parenthood door, so to speak, that the people that are on the inside don't really know what's happening, don't really acknowledge that that is human life? Like, do you think it's possible that she died genuinely thinking that she didn't do what people who would disagree with her would assume that she would know she had done? But like, how deceptive is the work to the people that are in it?
It's such a good question, Kevin. I remember when I left Planned Parenthood, I remember talking to some pro-lifers and just talking about the things that happened when I worked at the clinic. I mean, terrible things, the jokes that we made. And I just, now it's such an embarrassment. It's almost like I look back on myself and I'm like, how could I have done those things? How could I have said those things? How could I have laughed at those things? How could these things have even come out of my mouth? But that truly is what happens when you are blinded by sin and greed. Really, sometimes you just really can't see what is even in front of your face. I do think the higher you get up in Planned Parenthood, the harder it is to not see the truth. I think there are a lot of people that work in the clinic every day, just kind of your hourly workers that really don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But as I tell people all the time, as I rose up in the ranks of Planned Parenthood, I started to really wonder, is it that the organization is changing, or is it that I'm finally just seeing what we were about all along? And so I think as you get higher and higher up in the organization, you start to see, what was really behind that curtain. I think it does get harder to really deny who Planned Parenthood is, what Planned Parenthood is, and what they are about. And they are about making money off the death.
That is so important to point out. And I think one of the things that you can kind of point to by way of evidence of what you're saying is that under Cecile's leadership, the services that were offered to women that were supposedly women's health services that were outside of the scope of abortions practically evaporated. Like the breast exams, the cervical exams, other things that they were offering and saying, oh, it's all in the name of women's health, that basically dried up. And what it became was a franchise of providing abortions across the country, largely in the inner cities, largely in the poorest communities, largely in vulnerable areas where girls don't have a lot of options and a lot of people reaching them with other messages. And that was by strategy. Let me shift gears just a touch, because I don't want to end on something quite that negative. You watched the president be sworn in this week. You remember what it was like on the cycle of life under his first term. We've got 60 seconds left. What are you most hopeful about for this coming year?
I am, of course, we have great hope. The president showed us before that he believes in the sanctity of human life. And so I am hopeful that we will see more of that come from this current administration.
Abby Johnson, great to see you. Happy New Year. Happy Golden Age. And let's hope for a better 2025.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Hey kids, do you know why we have an immigration problem? ICE. And who wants to clean up ICE? Donald Trump, that's who. New from Lego, it's the Trump ICE Zamboni Immigration Action Set. Now you can help our 47th president clean up the ice rink, the streets, and the border wall.
Say hello to my MAGA Zamboni immigrant sweeper upper.
And If you buy right now, you'll get the Tom Homan Immigrant Deportation Fun Kit. Take control of ICE, the Trump MAGA ICE Zamboni Immigration Action Set, and the Tom Homan Immigrant Deportation Fun Kit. Get yours today before toys become illegal under Project 25.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Nostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Still to come, the death of DEI, Patrice Onwuka from the Independent Women's Forum. Plus, plenty of sketch comedy tonight from the Babylon Bee and the Glorious American. And returning, it's Jamie McDonald in the Spotlight. And now, the only member of the working press who did not get his question answered when President Trump went to the rope line before getting on Marine One. Here's that loser. Here's the
Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough. Due to the torrid pace of the new administration, one of which was a federal executive branch hiring freeze, some recent law school grads have had job offers from the DOJ rescinded. These candidates had applied long before the inauguration last Monday, and by random chance, the hiring freeze was one of the first executive orders President Trump signed. Assignment Desk Weekend has learned that an anonymous source within the DOJ did confess that their graduation from law school wasn't all that recent and that their rejection might have had more to do with the names as listed on their applications. Derek Carland, Christopher Cray, Kames Homey, and Hamali Terrace may not have survived the rigorous background checks involved. Spirit Airlines has announced it will decline passengers access to flying with inappropriate clothing or tattoos visible. Breasts, buttocks, and private parts are to be directly covered at all times. Lauren Sanchez was declined for such a long time just last Monday that she didn't even have time to get dressed before defiling the Capitol Rotunda with her attendance at the inaugural. For his part, Mark Zuckerberg tried to show support. He went home and liked all of her cleavage shots on Instagram. True story. Just to cheer her up. What a guy. And NFL playoff fever has taken the country this weekend's biggest matchup, featuring the Buffalo Bills and the twice defending Super Bowl champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. And in an odd series of developments, before the kickoff has even occurred, the Bills have already been penalized 782 yards and 72 points for roughing the passer against Patrick Mahomes, who literally just flopped to the ground upon hearing the news. For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough.
Store for the world this year. We at the Babylon Bee know exactly what's coming because we're prophets. Here's what you can expect. January, Donald Trump is sworn in as president, instantly making America great again and killing billions of people around the globe. Sad. Nancy Pelosi files new articles of impeachment against Trump. February, the New York Times runs a shocking article exposing how Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio have been eating people's pets. No one saw that coming. Woof. Vice President J.D. Vance opens the first of many government birthing camps for women. Also woof. March. Something really important happens in Europe. Nobody in America cares. The last 3 remaining Irishmen in Ireland celebrate St. Patrick's Day. RFK Jr. orders all future vaccines to be tested on Dr. Fauci. Take that, science. April. In a hilarious April Fool's Day prank, Donald Trump invades Greenland. A bloody Trump emerges from the cave of time, informing the world that he has defeated the Clockatron, leader of the Grand Clock Army, ending daylight savings time once and for all. May. The Chicago White Sox are eliminated from playoff contention. Trump declares Star Wars Day a national holiday and signs an executive order erasing the sequel trilogy from the canon. Hunter Biden announces he is quitting cocaine for good. Disney successfully ruins the last remaining beloved intellectual property from your childhood. June. Ellen DeGeneres gets caught trying to cross the Rio Grande to sneak back into the U.S. Congressional Democrats propose a bill to erect a statue of beloved national hero Luigi Mangione in the Capitol Rotunda. California is swallowed up by overgrown lawns after the mass deportation of Mexican landscapers. Ay, ay, ay. July. Hunter Biden announces he's quitting cocaine for good. Concerns rise over climate change once again as it starts getting pretty hot outside. A new Superman movie is released, but nobody sees it because it doesn't star a really hot guy like Henry Cavill. The Babylon Bee gets banned from Blue Sky, forcing Elon Musk to purchase the platform for $37. After weeks of intensely polite protest, Canada officially joins the U.S. as the 51st state. Hunter Biden announces he's quitting cocaine for good. August! Buc-ee's opens its first location on the moon. Mitch McConnell starts giving a speech on the Senate floor. California finishes counting ballots from the 2024 election. Arizona finishes counting ballots from the 2020 election. September. Mitch McConnell resumes his speech on the Senate floor after a month-long pause. There'll be an exciting ribbon-cutting ceremony to open the Joe Biden Presidential Library and nursing home. Buc-ee's opens a second moon location due to heavy traffic at the first moon location. All the animal life on Earth is extinguished after too many people start the carnivore diet. November. Americans gather to celebrate the anniversary of Kamala Harris's defeat. Trump releases secret JFK files revealing that President Kennedy was killed by seed oils. Trump orders the mass incarceration of people who serve tofurkey for Thanksgiving dinner. And finally, December, all the celebrities who announced they were leaving X in 2025 announced they will leave X in 2026. The U.S. Postal Service begins delivering packages from Christmas 2024. The nation agrees to a day-long truce from tearing each other apart on social media. Hunter Biden announces he is quitting cocaine for good. Scientists conclude yet another year of intense research without finding anyone who enjoyed Amazon's Rings of Power. Well, that's it. What are your predictions? Shout them at your screen right now. I can't.
The reality is that you're not one of the boys who have legs. You'll never be one of the boys who have legs. But you can be a good firefighter. People see you and they're like, wow, look at you, you know? They're so excited. Like, he's a firefighter and he's got no legs. Because there's not a lot of us for some reason. Probably racism. If you're also a member of the legless community, you want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's medical call or fire call, somebody that looks like you and also doesn't have legs that work. It gives that person a little bit of more ease knowing that this person might understand their situation a little better. People love that I'm a wheelchair firefighter going around the community kicking butt. I mean, not literally because of the legs that don't work. It's a metaphor. Every time you see a firefighter in a movie or show, they have legs and they're walking. The media plays such a big role in everybody's lives now that it's so powerful for people to see a positive, uplifting portrayal of a firefighter that's just rolling around. If you start thinking about the leg challenge, you think of desk jobs, you think of any job that you have to sit for a long time. You think about somebody who might be a headmaster for a school for gifted youngsters, but you wouldn't think of a firefighter when it's something that is actually a reality for many of the unlegged community. You can't be it if you can't see it, and so that's why it's so important for young members of the leg-free community to see us riding around on fire trucks. Plus, it's fun. Is he strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry me out of a fire? Or does he have enough legs for this? Which my response is, you got yourself in the wrong place if you need me to wheel you out of a fire. It's basically your fault. I was the first paraplegic person to be promoted to the rank of battalion chief. With each promotion, more eyes come on you, more scrutiny. They want to know, does he know what he's doing? Does he keep his crew safe? Can he get into a house that has more than a moderately sloped ramp? Some people walk in with the respect already. But as a person born with leg deficiency, you have to know your stuff. You're not given the opportunity not to know it. Not given, you have to know it. When it comes to the walking impaired and being a firefighter, you're capable of doing it. It's not a bipedal normative person's world. It's not a bipedal normative person's field. I'm here, I'm a man, and I'm doing it.
Ready or not, we'll be right back. That Kevin. Now, back to That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's That Kevin Show, and Kevin McCullough, very honored to have you with us. And as we have kicked off the new year, the new administration, the golden age, what is it? This weekend is like day 5 and 6. It's pretty cool because I feel like there's been more done in the work of this administration in this first week than you got out of like the first year of the last group. And I'm very, very pumped about that. But there's a lot of progress being made on a lot of different fronts. And if you've been watching or listening, you know, we've talked to national security people. We're going to talk to economic minds. But we're going to talk with my next guest about something that has probably been more at the center of the firestorm than almost anything else. But the left can't do anything about it because nobody disagrees with it. And it is the massive firing and ending of the DEI programs across the board. And someone who normally is with me to talk economics is talking about this today. Her name is Patrice Onwuka, and she is with the Independent Women's Forum. Patrice, Happy New Year. Happy new administration. I don't think I've seen you since maybe just around the election. It's wonderful to have you back. And Mao, what a difference an administration makes.
Oh, it's so good to be back on, Kevin. It feels like a new page has turned, and it's a new day. And I think there's so much to fix in this country. And already on day one, we saw President Trump starting at it.
Well, and it's interesting to me that, you know, I think that people put a lot of money where their mouth is with their actions, right? Mm. And so this is a guy who came into office and literally on day one, I watched him. We had the inaugural on all day, just kind of in the background, and we'd stop and watch the swearing in and then some of the services or whatever, and then he'd make the appearance at the big events and just kind of have it on him. But he was always on that day. Yes. He put in like a 26-hour day on day one. With the executive orders, and I think that there's a principle there that we used to maybe expect from our public leaders. Mm. Maybe we don't anymore, that when they're on the clock and they're working for us and they're hard at work for us. There's no grass growing under his feet. He is like, We've got a job to do and it's time to get started.
Well, he's acting as though he has 2 years of time to get anything done. And I think that's actually a good timeline to work off of, because in 2 years, Congress is facing what could be a loss of Republicans in the House. And maybe I think the Senate is pretty safe. But he wants to get as much done possible within the first 2 years. And frankly, within the first year alone of his presidency, if in case he doesn't have a second bite at the apple in 2026, 2027, 2028.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. And I think if he does get his agenda done, I think that Republicans actually could have a very good midterm. But it's just typical that you lose seats if you've been the ones in power. I also like the kind of the strategy of just spray policy. Like it's like shotgun pellets. They're just going everywhere, and it's hard for the bad guys to narrow in on one. I've seen AOC try to take on 3 different talking points in the last 3 days to just get some sort of momentum going behind something. And like, you know, the Elon Nazi salute is the best you could come up with. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that they're back on their heels kind of having to respond to. And if you keep pressing in every direction, making progress, they're not going to be able to keep up. It's too much too fast, and it's all for the good of the American people.
Well, I've seen a couple of networks describe it as chaos, but that's no longer landing anymore. It's controlled. I like the spray analogy that you use, but it's in essence just hitting as many targets as possible at one time. And you're right, it's hard for them to focus on any one. But this tells us that President Trump and the people he surrounded himself with, they were busy. Even while he was on the campaign trail, they were lining up all of the executive orders. They were talking to organizations like mine at Independent Women about what do we need to do on day one? What are those day one policies? So that this time wasn't spent trying to fill positions, trying to figure out who is who in Washington, and then what needs to get done. Yeah. He was able to absolutely have everything pre-written and ready to sign on day one. And so there is such a growth and just demonstrates that he's learned so much from the 4 years that he was in office, but also just a preparation that we didn't see the first time around, because I think everybody was shocked with his win.
I think that the 4 years he had out also gave him a sense of urgency that if he doesn't get stuff done, he may not have a chance to fix it again. And I just think that all added to the kind of gunpowder effect of what's going on here in these first few days. Let's turn to some specifics. The DEI firings across the board have been something that the voters spoke very clearly on, but yet the Democrats never really wanted to admit that it was a problem. They didn't like it. But these standards and policies and thresholds, and they're just falling by the wayside. And it's not just in government. Yeah, Trump's setting the tone, but you've got private sector businesses that were, neck deep in DEI trying to figure out how to make that work. And they've said, nope, we're done. We're good. That's it. Talk to us about how significant this is, that it's just a watershed moment where DEI is literally being washed away.
Well, last week, I actually wrote a blog post about the death of DEI when McDonald's got rid of its DEI policies. And McDonald's was one of the nation's leaders, one of the biggest workforces. So there has been a trend over the past, I would say, year in particular, where the large corporations have been getting rid of the DEI personnel, the programming, the quote pipelines that they use that frankly are unfair, discriminatory, and illegal. And then you saw this week with President Trump's executive order getting rid of DEI programming and personnel across the federal workforce, as well as the pressure that the Biden administration was putting on federal contractors to enact a lot of DEI policies within their own companies. So this is actually an example of where the private sector led and the public sector is following. But you can go to academia, Kevin, where we've seen red states like Florida and Texas ban DEI in colleges and universities, getting rid of those staffs there. They bloat these colleges and universities, increase the cost, and they sow division on campuses. So this is fantastic. 2020, we heard, was a watershed moment for racial reckoning in America, and it opened the floodgates to all of these social justice warriors and, frankly, race hustlers to inject DEI wherever they could. And as a result, and the backlash has been strong because the results have borne out. They make workforces more divisive. They haven't lifted the boats of the people who truly need opportunity and economic growth, whether that is people who are Black or Hispanic or people who are white for that matter. And then the Supreme Court in 2023, I really think supercharged this movement again away from DEI when it said affirmative action is dead in higher education, but that also meant that the private sector was saying, well, if those affirmative action policies at Harvard and some of the elite schools is no longer is invalidated, then what we're doing is constitutionally wrong too, and we don't want to get sued.
Yeah, I just never could figure out how you used racism to beat racism. And that's what DEI was, just by a different name. She's Patrice Onwuka. I'm Kevin McCullough. We've got more to discuss. She's with the Independent Women's Forum, who, by the way, has made enormous contributions to this first week of policy. We're going to talk a little bit about that straight ahead. Kevin McCullough coming right back from Times Square. Don't go away.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. Kevin McCullough, the Golden Age. I'm going to count every day through the entirety of the Golden Age because I just love that idea. It felt different on the very first day when he put his hand on the Bible and took it off. From that moment when they dismissed and everything he gave in the speech, it felt like a different country had just been born. Patrice Onwuka returns with me from the Independent Women's Forum to continue the discussion. One of the things that he said in that inaugural speech, and Patrice, I don't know how it read to you, but I loved him just listing the indictment of what the last administration had done to their face. This is a group of people who largely feel like they're unaccountable to the people. Yeah. And I thought in a very real way, he put them on trial right there in front of the American people. Far too little, far too late in terms of actual justice for families that have suffered a lot. But it was done nonetheless. But the bigger piece of the puzzle is to fix the wrongs. And when he said that in the American workforce, there will be two sexes, male and female, all the news reports I heard from all of the stations, the mainline stations, the 24-hour news stations, the OTT, everybody said that drew the biggest applause across the different audiences that were gathered there on Capitol Hill than anything else he said. Patrice, that was something that the Democrats never even addressed in their campaigning. And I largely think it was because they just didn't want to face it.
They didn't. I knew this issue was a sleeper issue, and IWF, we've been a leader on this well before anyone knew about Leah Thomas swimming in the girls' swim meets. It was because it's so fundamental and so basic to humanity, to us as individuals. Recognition that there are two sexes, male and female. And yes, people may think that they are a different gender and they may call themselves something different on any given day. But for the government to give that recognition and then to force society to follow with change, I think there was a revolt. Voters revolted against that. And the left was caught off guard because they assumed that this issue was similar to racism. You cry racism, it's to say, and you cry homophobia, the conversation ends, and then the other side is painted negatively, and the voter just goes along. But people said no to this because it is so basic and so, it comes back even to as fundamental as your faith, what God made you as. Right. And when you have someone like Charlemagne the God, who is a very popular podcaster and radio host in the Black community, saying, wow, that ad where Kamala Harris gave money to support sex changes for inmates in prison in California. I heard that. I said, whoa, wait, are they doing that? That's way too far. Yeah. So this was an issue that exposed how far the left had gone. The leftist elitist who thought that they're doing something very good in turning children into science experiments and their bodies into science experiments while exploiting their mental illnesses and real deep emotional hurts and traumas. And they suffered at the polls.
That brings me to what the priest said at the National Cathedral service, where she specifically isolated youth, particularly trans youth, and claimed that the president's policy is not a policy of mercy. She also went on to say that his rounding up illegal criminal aliens, is in some way unkind to people that are picking vegetables and cleaning hotel rooms and doing such things. It tells me, Patrice, that the left, the ideological left, and I would say this clergy person certainly falls into that category. She's actually an activist. She demonstrated in the George Floyd riots and other things. But it tells me that they have not heard what the voters said.
No, they don't, because they probably heard it, but they think that the voters are not smart enough to make the right decisions for themselves. This elitism, it's so interesting. It's not just that they feel like they have more money and more power and more say. It's that they think that regular people are not smart enough to live the best lives for themselves and to make the best choices for themselves. So, on this issue, on a lot of these issues, you see these the pastor talking about that being unkind to deport criminal illegals, and then even worse, to look down on consider all illegals. The only thing they're good for is cleaning toilets and picking fruit off of trees.
Thank you.
That's insulting within itself.
I was kind of like, does anybody else hear the words coming out of her mouth? Because if somebody from the conservative evangelical arena had said the same thing, there would have been a lawsuit blasted on that person within a day.
Well, that's how they view. That's how the left views immigrants.
Patrice Onwuka, Happy New Year, Happy Golden Age. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. Here he is from New York. That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to That Kevin Show from Times Square. It's Kevin McCullough. Glad to have you with us. And on Mondays, we emphasize our discussion to be about money a little more than the rest of the week. And one of the tools I've been telling you about for the last few weeks with my great new sponsor, Movement Mortgage, is the incredible reverse mortgage option, especially if you're 62 or over and you're still making a mortgage payment and you own your home. You've been told scary things like you're going to lose it or it's going to hurt your situation in ways. What if we could tell you that you could improve your cash flow, still build equity in your home, and keep your home with the reverse mortgage? That's the actual message that doesn't get told everywhere else. That's why I've loved working with Harlan Accola, who is with Movement Mortgage. And by the way, if you want any of the information that we're going to talk about, go to thathomecash.com. If you need cash, go to thathomecash.com. That's how simple it is. Harlan, good to see you. A new administration is moving in. Policies are going to change, but for some people, the situation doesn't improve drastically immediately. And I'm thinking specifically, you were pointing me to some articles recently about widows and what they are facing, particularly if they're still making mortgage payments. Can you tell me a little bit about what you found?
Well, 25 years ago, Kevin, I got into this business because of widows, because I cared about people that lost their husbands, they're in their 70s, they're in their 80s, and they just, everything changed. When their husband died, their Social Security went down. They, of course, were hurt socially and emotionally, but they were also hurt financially because most people don't realize that widows' income decreases by 40% when their husband dies. And most of the time, it is the widow that is left, not the widower. Men die first. And so there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of more widows than there are widowers, and they are forced to live alone usually 5 to 10 years after their husband dies. Financially, it's a big problem. And what's unusual about this is a lot of people say, well, reverse mortgages rip off the widows. And in fact, I once had somebody tell me, oh, you're the one that takes houses away from widows. No, I'm the one that keeps them in the house and makes their life better. It's the opposite of what you're thinking. Because as I progressed in my business over the last 25 years, I realized that it's not about trying to help the 80-year-old widow. It's about talking to the 65-year-old couple and telling them to get things in place and prepared, because there isn't one husband that I've talked to ever that said, I hope my wife has problems after I die. I really don't care what her financial situation is. I'm just going to take care of us. And if after I die, she can fend for herself. Nobody thinks that, but millions of husbands are leaving their wives in a very difficult situation, still making a mortgage payment when they don't have to. It just drives me nuts.
So let's talk about this from a practical standpoint. If widowhood is as widespread as it appears to be in all these articles, how does the reverse mortgage best help them?
So I would recommend to everybody once they turn 62 to do exactly what I did. I did a reverse mortgage to make my mortgage payment optional, even though I was still working. I'm still working, can afford to make a mortgage payment. It's fine. I'm not worried about it. But as soon as I turned 62, I immediately went to a reverse mortgage and made it optional. When we were taking off on the airplane just a day later, my wife was sitting next to me, and we were taking off for a little vacation, and she squeezed my hand and said, all that stuff you've been talking about to other people, I really can stay in the house for the rest of my life, even if something happens to you. And I was in tears. I squeezed her hand back because up to that point, it was always somebody else. Now it was us. And the fact is that if you do that, even if somebody wants to make a mortgage payment, and if my wife wanted to sell the house, if she wants to move, if she wants to stay in the house, it is now 100% up to her, and she never has to worry about whether or not she has a place to live for the rest of her life. That wasn't a complicated thing for me to do. I just understood it better than most because that's my business. But if I could talk to any husband out there for a half hour, he would clearly understand this is what I should do now. Not when a crisis happens, not when something goes wrong, but right now. And when things are fine and the sun's out and there isn't any storm, now is the time to take care of things, not after you're dead and the wife is scrambling trying to figure out what to do.
Friends, the way it works is somewhat simple. You just reverse your mortgage and you let the equity or a portion of your equity improve your cash flow. You're not losing your house. And in many cases, your house continues to build equity because the value of the houses continue to go up. And what you use is far less than the total amount that you have in it. And so it's not even an issue of losing the house or in any way not leaving a legacy for your family or anything else. This is a tool specifically for those of you who are 62 years of age or older. You've been buying your house. You want to be prepared. You want to free up cash flow. You want to stay in your home. You want to do all the things that you want to do. Maybe you want to help causes that you believe in and you've never been able to because you're making these enormous payments. Harlan, I like to think of it as someone who would still be paying into their pension after they retired. Nobody would do that. But it's kind of the same idea. Oh, I'm still going to pay into my IRA even though I no longer work. No, the reason that you have invested in this investment is so that you have what you need to be able to use when you need to use it. We just don't normally think of our mortgages in that way.
You know, that's so true. Over in Europe, in one of the reverse mortgages in a country over there, I can't think of which one it is right now, but they call it a home pension. And that's really a good explanation of it because it's just simply something that you put money in. Now you can take it out. I put enough money into our house. So have millions of other people. Why continue to put money in so that your wife has a whole bunch of money tied up in the house after you're gone? And besides that, why not make some memories? I was just walking with my wife yesterday thinking about the vacations that we've went on with our kids because we don't have a mortgage payment, and all of those memories that we share together of when we were in the mountains in Austria and when we were together with our kids in the Eiffel Tower and hiking on a glacier in Iceland. I would have never been able to do those things if I wouldn't have properly planned.
209-702-0007.
Stick around for more